the critical importance of controlling your own customer data so that you can nurture those relationships and go back to them again and again and again.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into today's live interview. Joined today, soon to be on the stage, Greg Johnson. Going to be talking about email and newsletter growth. And Kelly, I'm super excited for this challenge in this interview, where we're going to challenge ourselves to really dig into what does it mean to have an email newsletter in the first place in 2024, and how does that actually go back to affecting the bottom line of our business. I know you said some things about why email is important right before we hopped on and started recording here. I'd love for you to kind of share a little bit more about like where you see this interview fitting into our community and all of us as entrepreneurs that are looking to grow our business.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. It's so good to be here on today's boot camp. I love seeing all the faces. And I know, Darby, we've been doing a lot over the past few months when it comes to just that, like honing in on creating content, repurposing content from our video podcast challenge, right, to that omni-channel challenge that we ran. And something that I know, and you guys know, I'm always like fully transparent with where I hit my own speed bumps, if you will, in my business. But I know that when we're really focusing on creating content consistently, right, one of the things that I know where I get momentum from is when I have like an offer, right? And I'd love to know how many of you know you should be doing emails or creating content consistently, but when you're about to launch something or when you're about to promote something, then you're really like, oh, I gotta really get in on those emails. And if you're on my email list, you know that sometimes a week may go by and you won't hear from me. But if I have a workshop coming up, Kelly's back in the email, right? 3 or 4 times before the workshop. And I think part of this is because when we don't have something that we feel like we can always offer, I think we struggle with what to do with the content. Like, what do we do with it? Where do we lead them? Like, what's the call to action if there's no workshop or there's no offer or there's no program that's starting? And I think an email newsletter is like 100% the solution for all of us to get into that zone of we always have something to offer, right? There's always content to be created, and there's always something that we can continuously invite people to. Versus like, hey, get on my email list and maybe you'll get an email me in 2 weeks when my workshop's coming up, right? Being able to get into that daily practice of having the newsletter, consistently delivering content, and then always having something to build your email list with, because there's always that offer. So I know I'm super excited, Greg, for you to be here today, because I know I have a lot to learn from you, and I really see how those email newsletters can solve a lot of, I think, challenges that many of us see in our business.
All right, cool. Well, yeah, thank you all for having me. I love doing things like this. So Darby, thank you for the invite.
Absolutely.
And just to give everybody a little bit of background about me and what I do and why I do email. I started B2B business long time ago, had nothing to do with online anything, but the core of what we did was really built around our customer list. And so we used email and phone calls, basically. Like every month we were drumming up business from our existing customers, and that accounted for probably 50% of our revenue month over month. So this is a small business that I started with 2 partners. We had a 7-figure run rate within 5 months, and we operated that for many years. And what I learned from that was the critical importance of controlling your own customer data so that you can nurture those relationships and go back to them again and again and again. Because if we had needed to drum up new customers every single month, we never would have made it. So carrying that forward, I've been doing e-commerce and digital marketing for the last several years. I help a lot of people in the e-commerce space, especially around email marketing. And just to kind of throw some numbers out there, I've helped people do like crowdfunding campaigns really built around email, and they've done 5- and 6-figure launches. I've got a client right now who has built a very strong email list on the back of their social media content, and they have it's an e-commerce brand. They have a very in-demand product. These people can send an email when they have a new product in stock, and they do $100,000 in 10 hours. So that is the critical importance with emails, that it allows us to focus attention when we want to. So if you have an offer and you post it on social media, you don't know when those people will see it. It might be 3 days from now. You don't know who's going to see it. You have no control over distribution. But when you get your people onto an email list, you can click send and put that offer in front of everyone all at once, right? And so now you can do things like having deadlines. You can have scarcity and urgency, which massively change your conversion rates. You can control that with email. It's also a platform you own. You're not subject to somebody else's algorithm or shadow banning or whatever else. So that's why I really focus in on this. Is like the core asset of any online business, in my opinion, is the email list. So we can dive in. I can tell you about how I do my own content marketing, primarily through email. It's different than what I do with in the e-commerce world. This is more basically me selling coaching courses, digital products, and how depending on what market you're in, how you can adapt these principles to do what you need to do to maximize the revenue, customer lifetime value, all those important things.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. And I would love to kind of start with a more high level overview of like, what does it look like to start to kind of monetize into the next steps. And when we were discussing this interview today, we kind of like had like a 5-day outline, a framework of how, if someone were to say, I want to get a newsletter launched, like what might I do? I might lay a foundation on day one. Then I might on day two create the content and plan everything else out. Then I might plan the launch on day three and the promotion around it. And then from the launch, you got to grow and engage your list. And then how are we going to monetize it? And what are the next steps from there? And so we have people from e-commerce, we have folks from, just freelance consulting to larger scale businesses. And like the theme that you mentioned was, I think is perfect for this, is you want to be able to control that distribution point. You want to be able to control that conversation, that you can connect directly with your customers, create specific customer journeys. And there's also like things that you want to avoid with email that can get you like in trouble with service providers that I want to touch on too, because while it's great to know that you can email people, it's also a thing to land in spam if you like don't have proper email hygiene. And so, I would love to kind of like hear kind of like from that top level, like where, if someone's starting, what does that life cycle look like to you? And then maybe we can get into some more of the questions and the nitty gritty as we dig in.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I would say if you are really, truly at the very beginning, meaning you don't even have an email service provider software set up, we can start right there. So what I'll say is, if you happen to be doing e-commerce tied in with your own website, there are platforms that are specifically built for that, and I'd encourage you to probably go with one of those. So the big ones that I'd encourage you to take a look at are Klaviyo, SendLane, MailerLite. There are more, but those are the three that I generally recommend. They allow your email software to talk to your e-commerce website. So you have data about who is viewing products, who's adding to cart, who's making purchases, and it lets you to do some really, really specific messaging around the actions people are taking. So that's an important piece to have if you're doing purely e-commerce on your own website. Now, if you're doing an e-commerce marketplace like Amazon or Etsy, that's a lot less important. If you're doing really anything else that doesn't need that level of integration with something, there are other platforms that I like more than the three I just named. Honestly, MailerLite is pretty robust for either use case, and it's not too expensive, so I have a lot of people using that. I'm personally using something called Beehive right now. And I can talk a little bit more about that later. I think it's a fantastic option for anybody who is building a newsletter as the product in some sense, right? The content that you're sending out regularly is the thing people are signing up for. If that's the case, Beehive is a really powerful newsletter-specific platform. It's built by guys who are part of the Morning Brew team. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they scaled and sold their newsletter for 8 figures. very much a media company. And so they are building in a lot of tools to help with all aspects of this journey. Another very solid option is ConvertKit. ActiveCampaign is also great. So there are a lot of options. They all have, I would say, roughly the same functionality, roughly the same pricing. So your option there is really not going to make or break what you're doing. Just choose something decent. I would steer clear of MailChimp. I just don't like them. They're kind of a legacy provider. They were one of the first ones on the scene, but they have not kept up with the innovation, and they're a lot more expensive at higher tiers than other providers that have more functionality. So they're the only one I really give a thumbs down to. So you want to pick something that's suitable for your use case. So again, if you're tied in with an e-com website, look at one of the three I named. Otherwise, I would be taking a look at Beehive, ConvertKit, ActiveCampaign. Those give you a lot of options and functionality that are important to me, at least.
I want to quickly pause you, Craig, if you don't mind, with you bring up ConvertKit in the second tier versus Klaviyo. And Klaviyo is great, I know, for e-commerce. And I see ConvertKit catering more towards creators and like bloggers. And something that I've noticed when I'm testing out a platform like Beehive is it has some differences, right? A lot of these tools will have some features that vary from here to there, but it stuck out to me that ConvertKit had the ability to like plug in products directly, like inside of their own flows, which Beehive seems more geared towards subscription based, like unlocking different levels of content through a subscription base, and then also like advertising through their marketplace. And so like maybe you don't have to like dig into that right now, but I think like the highlight here is like anybody that's listening to this right now and wanting to go and like explore these, like do your own due diligence and like for your specific use case. Like there's no one size fits all for any of this. And so I appreciate you sharing like a variety of tools and encourage everyone to really do your own due diligence when you're looking through any number of these tools. Yeah,
100% agree. ConvertKit is still the gold medal for creators, info product businesses. They've been doing this a long time. They have all the functionality built in. Beehive is catching up. They're adding one major product update per week for the last 2 years. So they're quickly closing the gap. And they do have some other features, like I mentioned, that I like. But if you want something very solid, you honestly can't go wrong with ConvertKit. I think they're great. And there's kind of this rivalry between them and Beehive. So people get very passionate about one or the other in certain little corners of Twitter or X or whatever it's called. But yeah, honestly, either one, again, it will not make or break what you're doing. Either one is a very, very solid option. Each one is a little bit different in its focus about who they're building for.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. So once you have your software lined up, you really need to know who you want to target. You need to know who your ideal customer is, who your niche is, and you need to be able to come into that with some element of uniqueness. So, for example, I have seen dozens, maybe even hundreds of AI tool specific newsletters come out because it's a very there's a ton of demand. There's a ton of attention being placed there. And so there's a lot of content being created around that. And I subscribe to several, and some of them are very, very, very good. And the ones that I think are good have some sort of unique spin on what they're delivering. So some of them are very prompt based. You know, they're developing and sharing new prompts to that help with specific use cases. Other ones are sharing links to new tools, right? Like new cutting edge things, because it's a very fast developing space in the software world. There's a cool new tool every week. And so some of them just keep you updated. Other ones are more of a comparison, you know, this versus that for the use case of photo editing or, you know, video editing, adding voiceover, something like that. So as long as there's some sort of unique twist to like really how they're presenting their material and they are consistent with that, then they can be very, very successful. The ones that I see struggling are very generic feeling. Like it's a bunch, they try to do everything all at once. And it's basically like it feels like a link dump. If you know what I'm if you've seen it, there's just 50 bazillion links, and the point of a newsletter in that space is to curate information to make it easier for a reader to consume. And so if you put in too much, you're doing the opposite. You're overwhelming them, and it's not helpful. And so newsletters like that are not growing. So, that's a very specific example in a specific niche, but the same is true anywhere. There are newsletters that are about finance and investing or crypto or Web3, or mine is email marketing. Some of them are more commerce specific. Some of them are more hobby specific. I've seen ones around pets. So, I mean, it can be anything, right? The key is you need to have some sort of unique twist on what you're doing. And that very simply could be in the format that you present. Or my favorite way to differentiate is to inject some of your own personality into what you're doing. So, even if you're using generative AI for some of the content creation, if you can inject some of your own unique perspective or opinion, or your own unique take, or your own vocabulary or voice, right, to really kind of brand the content as yours, first of all, it's basically impossible for anyone else to copy that because it's you, right? Like they can't duplicate you. The other thing is that it's very easy, relatively speaking, to get a person to connect with another person versus like a logo. So this is kind of what I preach in the e-commerce world, telling people that if they're willing to be in front of their brand as the face, they will generally move faster because people are more willing to connect with another person versus a faceless brand with a logo. So obviously there's different levels of that. A lot of people in the online space want to keep it relatively faceless. That works too, but I think it takes a little bit longer to get traction because you're missing that initial connection point. So I would say keep that in mind as you make your decision about how you want to position this. If you are willing to inject personality into the content, you're going to resonate more with some people and repel other people, which is fine. But you can generally grow a engaged fan base faster if you're willing to be somewhat involved in terms of face personality in some regard.
Yeah, the personality is something I've been noticing a lot more of in the topic of conversation when like everything is getting more maybe say generic with AI or just getting more noisy. Like who are you actually listening to and paying attention? And like there's even AI personalities that have their own pages that people subscribe to or their own Instagram accounts and things of that nature. But also that human to human connection is something that I see people craving more now than ever before because we're just so inundated with this technology. So I think something to be maybe like that you could touch on a little bit is if someone is considering being the face or the personality of a brand, what are like maybe some things you might want to avoid in terms of how you're setting up or structuring your team or like how you're producing content so that if you stop working or producing and being part of like the operation, is it all just going to totally fall flat? Which can happen if it's all me. I stop producing content and then crickets because I'm not always the one that's pushing it forward. Are there ways that you can approach this from a creator's perspective that yes, you might be the face and the personality, but you're also building in teams and systems and structure to not have it be all the weight of the world on your shoulders. I'm curious what if you have any thoughts on that specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple ways to approach this. And obviously, as you grow and scale, this becomes more important because there's something called founder's risk. There's an advantage. I tell people there's an advantage up front in being the face, but it's a disadvantage at some point down the road. So the way to mitigate that, there's a few things. If we're talking about using different generative AI tools, it's it's getting easier and easier to train some of these models on your own voice if you have sufficient content to feed it. So this is something that I don't think a lot of people do well, but I know some people do it well. Uh, when they do it well, you can't tell they're doing it, but they can train a large language model on their existing writing and just be able to generate content in their voice faster. And then they might go in and do some of the edits on that. You can train a team to generate that, go in and do some edits. So that would be one way to mitigate that risk. Another way is to position what you're doing as a team effort, a team collaboration. So you could have different authors in there, but always identify who is doing a particular piece, right? And you have the ability, just like a band, right? You can swap out the drummer if you need to. You can even swap out the lead singer, but the band itself is still the band. So that's another way that these companies, the newsletter media companies, have traditionally done this, is they've had a team of writers and editors going in, and sometimes their work is attributed on the front end, other times it's not, but they have this underlying set of principles and kind of content pillars that dictate what people are doing. And there is still a person or people to connect to, but it's not entirely 100% on the back of one person.
Thank you. And with the content in mind, as you're setting this up, can you share some examples of how you would go about planning, or like maybe like what are some of the ways that you approach planning out content so that you're not constantly rushing to create a newsletter because it's Tuesday and I forgot to write my content bit, or I didn't plan accordingly? Like maybe some tips for success as people are getting ready to embark on this endeavor in preparation for a launch, so that they're not constantly playing catch up.
Definitely. I can give some general advice, and then depending on someone's particular writing style, there are some different strategies that you can use to do this. So obviously having a pipeline of content is better than doing things last minute. That being said, I don't personally always have a pipeline of content. So sometimes I am doing the last minute edit before I hit publish. Definitely not best practice. I don't recommend it, but sometimes that's where you end up. And I think hitting publish is more important than not. So consistency in publishing is really important for growth. So what I would say in terms of planning, this is where personally I get the most utility out of tools like ChatGPT. I love for planning, for outlines, structure, bullet points, that kind of thing, and then I build on top of that. So I have not been able to create a good model like trained in my voice that's able to spit out copy or content that I want to directly use, but it's very good to help me to organize my own thoughts around different topics and then be able to create content around that. So some people, there's kind of two different ways that people write, I've noticed, and maybe it's like a left brain, right brain thing, but some people can have an idea and they just sit down and they simply write top to bottom. It just flows out of them. And then they might go back and edit, move things around a little bit, clean it up, and it's ready to go. Other people require an outline first. They need some guideposts that they know they're moving from A to B to C to D. And once they have an outline, they can flesh it out, right? They can kind of fill in the gaps. Two fundamentally different writing styles, and both are fine. I think they're just different styles that are more like temperament or personality dependent. So I'm more of the top to bottom writer, but I need to have that core idea that I'm working from, and then I can just kind of go from there. So understanding how you write best is important so that you set yourself up for success. So what I do when I'm trying to fill my pipeline is I come up with a bunch of seed ideas, and this could probably 2 to 3 sentences of a core idea that I want to explore and an insight that I want to give. So a lot of my writing specifically is giving people unexpected insights, right? That's how I build trust with my audience, so that when I go to make an offer, it's easier to get those conversions. They already trust me. I don't have to do a lot of heavy lifting in the sales campaign on a sales page. They just trust that what I'm saying is true. And if it's a good fit, they buy. So I'm doing a lot of, okay, I want to teach them this, which is not what they currently believe. And so the way I come in is I come in and I confirm what they already believe. Hey, you may have noticed this, you may have observed this, right? And I am doing that to kind of build rapport, and then I'll throw in a twist. What you may not realize is that what most people say about that is totally wrong. I happen to believe this other thing, and let me explain why. And then I'll fill that out, right? And I can wrap in some like some storytelling aspects to make it more interesting. That's kind of how I do this stylistically. But so I basically just need those kernels of, here's the thing, here's the belief I'm going to overturn. Here's how I'm going to do it. You know, here's the insight I'm going to provide. And then eventually, like I usually do this with some sort of call to action in mind, like some offer in mind, even if I'm not presenting it that day. So sometimes I will put content out regularly, chipping away at somebody's belief about something that is false, getting them ready for this new thing so that when I present the new thing as an offer, they're all primed up to want it, right? It fills a gap that I've created, if that makes sense. So if we're talking about, again, everybody's using this for slightly different purposes. So like that particular style, that works for what I'm doing. But for e-commerce, we'd be doing something different. The content cadence for a purely e-commerce brand is more like we're providing value, insight, nurturing around problems that they may encounter in the context of how our brand helps them, right? So maybe somebody is buying personal care items, right? We sell skin moisturizer in soap or something. Well, we can be talking about skincare tips. Here's, 5 ways to do whatever. Talk about various things, and then we occasionally plug our product as the solution to one of those problems. So that would be what the regular content cadence looked like. And then once in a while, we'd have a structured promotion where it's like, hey, special deal, get this thing 20% off this weekend only. What a lot of e-commerce brands do wrong is that's the only content they send. And it very quickly cheapens not only the brand, but it cheapens the newsletter experience. And then that's when open rates go down, click rates go down, and then the newsletter, the email list dies. So we want to keep them engaged and give them helpful, valuable things along the way so that when we do throw out a purely sales offer, it doesn't feel creepy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you're like the jab, right hook, right? You're leading with value, you're giving information, you're helping people understand that maybe they have problems they weren't even aware of, but you're addressing these throughout the stories and the insights that you're providing. And then here's the offer for how you can help solve it if you're having this type of issue.
Yeah.
Certainly can see how only sending out discount promo codes only all the time to your newsletter list could quickly burn a list out. And so a lot of this seems like it comes back down to like, how are you planning and preparing? Like, what's the ultimate goal for what this newsletter is designed to do? And depending on your business, that is going to change. But ultimately, like, there's like a launch of getting a newsletter out there. And then there's kind of like the growing and the nurturing of it, which you've mentioned it a few times as being consistent. Like with that growth, how do you like balance out some of that promotion of the newsletter versus like maybe getting people to refer your newsletter because they like it? Like I know tools like Beehive have referral tools built into it, but could you touch maybe a little bit about someone's got an idea, they've got like they know what tool they're going to use, they've got the plan for like the first month's worth of content. Now they're ready to launch and start promoting it. Like, what does that look like? What might somebody do to help ensure that at least they know what is available to them upon a launch, like influencers,
Absolutely.
networks?
So specifically launching the newsletter itself.
Yeah, specifically.
Okay. Again, I think the most valuable perspective that you can carry into this is create a newsletter that is a product in and of itself, right? Create content that's so good that people willingly sign up for it. We don't need to trick them into signing up for it. Like they actually show up week after week and open your newsletter because they've had a good experience and they want to read it. So the metric here is if you can get people to open your emails because of the sender name and not the subject line, that's when you're winning. Does that make sense? Right? We spend a lot of time on these, hooky, attention grabbing, curiosity inducing subject lines to get people to open. But if you do the content well for long enough, people open because of the sender name. You could literally leave the subject line blank and they'll still open it. So that's like we want the content we're sending out to be so valuable and so good and interesting or entertaining or whatever, people come back next week because of how good this week was. So that's like the guiding light for what we're creating. So when we launch this, we can talk about some high level stuff, but also tactics, right? First of all, launch your newsletter to everybody you know. If you have an audience around your business or brand, obviously launch to them, but launch it to your personal contact list. Launch it on your personal social media accounts. I even know people who have gone through their contacts on their phone, texting a link, a sign-up link to everyone personally in their contact list with like a little blurb. Hey, I'm launching this thing. I'd love your support. Love it if you hopped in. And there are people who have got their first 1,000 subscribers doing that, just like guerrilla tactics, like get people on that newsletter and then start sending stuff out. So that's number one. Just use your personal network, whatever you have access to. If you have friends with audiences who would be willing to give you a shout out, like go after that. So get as many people organically from your own network as possible to get things kicked off. And then the next phase is what I would call like structured, intentional growth. What most people do to start is they do some combination of, well, it's really organic social media is the main driver. So what that looks like is one of the cool things about Beehive is when you send an email, you can click a button and also turn it into a post on your hosted website. So depending on the structure of the content, you can send something as an email only, or you can basically turn it into a blog post, or you can do both at the same time. So what that means is if you're writing an email, writing a newsletter about a specific topic that's really interesting, go ahead and hit publish, and then you can grab the URL for that post and then go share that on social media. And if you do this like depending on the tool you're using, Substack is another tool that kind of allows this content gating that I'm about to describe. But what I've seen people do very successfully is, the full post is visible to subscribers, right? But there's a little thing you can insert into that post so that somebody reading it on the web who's not a subscriber reads and reads and reads and reads, and then all of a sudden there's a subscriber break and they have to subscribe to see the rest. So this can be a very powerful tactic. You can publish once a week and allow non-subscribers from who are visiting from social media to see 3/4 of the post, but then there's something really juicy underneath that break and they have to subscribe to get it. So you make the post and then you link back to it, share that on social media every week when it comes out. People will go in there and some percentage of them will subscribe every single time. So that,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Darby.
I feel like that's a really powerful use for like why like a Substack or a Beehive is unique in some sense compared to an active campaign where you send email out and people that are on your list get the email, but like no one else is getting it, and it's sent and you have to either resend it or do a new campaign, and like there's a whole time and place for that. But that was one of the things that caught my interest about testing out Beehive, which I'm experimenting with my own newsletter on there now. and like how to best set this up is like, oh wow, like now an email could also be a blog post that could also be like it's evergreen like lead generator.
Yeah,
And if I'm doing this every single week, then it seems like there's a compounding effect that will just happen over time, and probably will have a lot of contribution to the overall growth of the newsletter if you are being consistent with it.
absolutely. And if you know anything about Google SEO, you can optimize these posts around SEO. So you can write one with the intention of it being a blog post for, organic traffic purposes, in addition to just hitting publish on something that's an email. And again, you have that dual functionality. You can use it either or both and, which is cool. That's one of the things that really drew me to the platform as well. So in addition to sending traffic back to already existing posts with a subscriber break, you can also tease what you're about to publish on social media. So I've seen other creators do this very effectively. Hey, on Friday, I'm dropping an issue where I share about, this, and this, and, nobody else is talking about this stuff, but you have to be on my list to get it. And so they drop that on social media. It has a really juicy hook. People sign up because they want that newsletter. And you can even go back and forth and use a combination of those two tactics. So that's really the two most effective organic social media growth tactics that I see. And then on top of that, we can do things like incentivized referrals. So, I mean, you can do this on your own, but Beehive has it built into the platform. You can incentivize people to share your newsletter, or you can incentivize subscribers to share with other people and give them rewards and whatever. You can turn it into anything you want. So I have a handful of super referrers on my own list, like people that have referred 20 plus additional subscribers on. And so I've sent them nice physical things because it honestly, it would have cost me more to run ads for the number of people that they sent. So you can do that. And there's strategies around having that be really effective, which, I can share those later. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but there are entire strategies built around how to get people to refer other people to your newsletter effectively on an ongoing basis.
Yeah. I think part of that is like also like having great content that people are happy to refer because it's good content, right? And then like the tools and those all like mechanisms that can help with gasoline on the fire.
Absolutely.
Or a question of people that already have an existing list and they want to launch a newsletter. Is there like a best practice for, let's say I have a list of 1,000 people and I'm launching a new newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
Should I just opt those people in, like just add them to the new newsletter and start sending them in, or should I email them first and then like ask if they are going to go and opt in, or like, because I guess like it's probably like, okay, depending on certain situations and what your business is and how they even opted in the first place. But is there like a best practice for someone with an existing list wants to start a new newsletter? Like how would you approach kind of like that spin-off newsletter in a way that's not going to get you dinged or like, break any rules with
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I would say it depends on the relationship that you already have with that list, why they signed up, and how big of a leap the next thing is. So, if you have a newsletter that was built on pet owners and you're launching a clean skincare brand, right? That's a big leap. So there's going to be less traction. If the new thing you're launching is very closely related to why they signed up in the first place, you can probably get away with, I would still at least notify them, say, hey, I'm starting this new thing. I think it's going to be really valuable. I'm going to move you over there unless you tell me not to, right? So if you don't want to be included, click here and I'll make sure you don't get moved, right? So it would be like you're giving it an opportunity to opt out. And so that way you'll move more people, but the people that like some of them will only be like kind of, loosely engaged, if that makes sense. The other extreme would be to require them to actively opt in. say, hey, I'm starting this new thing. It's going to be really cool. If you want in, click here, right? And then incentivize that in some way. You'll have far fewer people come over, but the ones who come over are going to be highly, highly engaged. So I've seen it done both ways. I think the important point is you want to notify them what they're doing and give them some sort of autonomy, whether it's opting in directly or the ability to opt out so that you don't piss anybody off. Because if they get moved over and they weren't informed and there's not an obvious opt out, that's when you could get hit with spam complaints, which is even more serious now than it was. If Gmail sees you being reported, if you have something like 0.3% spam complaints over the course of a month, you could get blacklisted from every Gmail inbox, which is very, very bad. So this is a new policy change that dropped in February of this year, and they're tightening enforcement of it. So we really it's really much, much better right now to have a smaller but cleaner list because of that. If you have this awesome 100,000 person list, all these people on it, but you get too many spam complaints, now you can't reach anybody, right? It's better to have the 10,000 person list of people who open and click and read and are deeply engaged in what you're doing.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And like engagement, being like ethical and how people are even getting on the list, not sending people information that they never opted in with at the first place. Like it seems like best practice, like should be common knowledge, but like also like be really careful, even like if you think that I would say like just double check like how you're approaching getting anyone onto a list, especially now because of the seriousness of like keeping in good standing with like sources like Gmail and the email providers where you're actually trying to land. Does nobody any good if you're just landing in spam, and then you kind of cut off that tie, and a lot of bad things can happen when it comes down to that.
Absolutely.
With the start of a newsletter, we talked about launching it, we talked about growing it, keeping that engagement, selling relevant content. You've got a good foundation. Like now we can talk more about like, I've got a newsletter, it's growing, I've got thousands of subscribers. Now I have opportunities to leverage my newsletter and my distribution to maybe make advertising deals, maybe to get sponsors that will pay happily to get in front of my audience. You talk a little bit more about how like the monetization works with not specifically Beehive. I know they have some like some capabilities built into their platform, but like what does that look like as you start to grow and have a successful newsletter and you want to start monetizing with maybe not your own products, maybe affiliate products, other avenues for revenue generation that you can tap into?
Absolutely. There are a lot of options here, which is cool. It's almost overwhelming. So what I would say is that most of us are aware of the fact that we can directly sell things to our email list, right? So we own the offer. Maybe it's a physical product, e-commerce. Maybe it's a course or coaching or digital product, and we say, hey, do you want to buy this thing? And then we collect all the revenue from that, right? But we also have to do all the work of creating the product, doing all the fulfillment, all that stuff, right? It's the highest revenue, but the highest amount of work on our end, right? So then if we go one level up, there's the world of affiliate marketing, where we have a relationship with people on a newsletter or email list, and we are sharing other people's products and services with them. And every time we make a sale, we get a cut of the revenue, right? So if we're selling an info product, maybe we get a 50% cut. If we're promoting a physical product, it's probably more like 10 or 20% because there's a cost of goods on that. So there are people that make their livings doing that kind of thing, promoting other people's stuff. And for a long time, that's kind of where it ended in terms of what you can do with an email list. But because of newsletters that exist as media companies like Morning Brew, which I mentioned before, they can monetize attention. So if you have 10,000 people opening your newsletter and clicking on links, you can go to other businesses And instead of doing an affiliate deal, you can do a sponsorship deal. And these come in two flavors. You can set it up so that they pay you per click that you generate, or you can simply do a flat rate for the placement. Generally, you need to have a fairly large publication to be doing flat rate sponsorships. But if you're in the tens of thousands of subscribers, you can charge a couple grand to put a banner ad in your newsletter one time. And again, if it's niche specific and matched up, but advertisers more and more want very, very targeted, specific ways of advertising. They've all been spoiled on Facebook ads and Google ads, and we can get very specific in who sees our stuff. And you can do that with newsletters too, because they're usually built around a very specific topic. You know something about your subscriber base in terms of if you do this right, you can kind of know who they are, income level, that kind of thing. And so you can sell placements, you can run an advertisement for someone and get paid for the number of clicks that you generate. And again, it doesn't matter to you whether or not people buy something. You are monetizing the attention that you command and not needing them to take that final action of sales conversion for you to get paid. So that's pretty cool, right? And of course, if you do generate sales on that back end, that advertiser is more likely to come back and ask you to work, ask to work with you again. So this is something that I think is fairly new in the like the non-gigantic media company newsletter. So right, you can have a 2,000 person newsletter and still monetize to some extent through these tools. There are software tools that let you kind of set up some of these deals. Beehive is one of them, but there's others as well. And you can flat out reach out to potential sponsors and like cook up a deal and then just have a way to do link attribution. So you can absolutely set this up on your own. So if you only monetize using those types of strategies, your revenue per subscriber is generally lower. And so that's why a lot of these newsletters are so hell-bent on growth. They want 100,000 subscribers so that they can have the monetization make sense. But personally, I think that you can use this as part of your mix and still have some of those higher value monetization strategies built in addition to doing some of the sponsorships and ads. So what I'm exploring right now, because, let's be honest, if you run an ad in your newsletter, you are kind of taking a small deposit out of that relationship bank with your subscribers. Like if they see other people's ads every single week, that is diminishing your relationship with them. So what I'm exploring is delivering ads to a small segment of my list that I don't think is going to be monetized through other avenues, so that they're still monetized to some extent, right? I'm still getting something per subscriber per month. And then I have people that are willing to pay me for higher ticket offers that I'm not sending ads to, that are going to get put into some of my other campaigns. I have another thing that I think is really important to share about monetization. When you have a list of people around a particular topic, I think if any of you have struggled with offer creation, kind of like in the digital product space, like what can I even create? What do they want? You create this thing and then nobody buys it. Like there's kind of a lot of confusion and risk tied up in that. But what I've learned and what I've done many times that works really well, you can do this with e-commerce too, is email your best people and ask them what they want. And I did this last November. I had an idea for something I wanted to offer, and I sent an email to my VIPs. It was 80 people total. I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. And it was kind of like a 90-day coaching program sprint to gear them up for the new year, right? I said, here's what I'd like to do. I think it would look like this. I think it would have cost about this much. like, how does that sound? Would you even be interested in something like that? And I had a poll embedded in the email, and people could choose, like, one of the options, very specifically worded, was, that sounds awesome. I would buy it right now. And then another option was, I like the deliverables, but not the price, and then not interested at all, or I want something different. So I sent that out, and a lot of people clicked on, I love that idea. I would buy it right now. So I individually emailed each of those people and said, cool, so glad you like the idea. I think I'm going to do it. If you really want to buy it now, here's the Stripe link. Because when I send this to my entire email list on Black Friday, like, it's going to sell out in 10 minutes, but you can get early access. Like, here's the link. I'll just save your spot, right? Sold it out 2 weeks before Black Friday. No landing page, no sales letter, no sales emails. I proposed an idea. They told me that they liked it, and I sent them a payment link. So you can do this. I've seen other creators do this very well. They'll do test offers. Hey, would you be interested if I did this? Hey, would it be helpful if I created this? And they wait for that feedback, and they will oftentimes pre-sell the thing before the thing is created to truly, like, if somebody pulls out their credit card and pays, that means the idea is validated and you can move forward. So by doing that, you can let your email list create the offers for you, and then you just sell them the thing that they said they wanted, and you collect the money before you create it, and then create it on the back end, and of course make sure it's a great experience. So you can do this in e-commerce too. Obviously, the life cycle, right, from product idea to creation and delivery, like, that's a little more extended than with a digital product. But I have friends and clients who do this exact same thing. Hey, we're thinking about either creating product A, B, or C. Which one would you be most excited about? Cool, everybody voted on C. We have found a prototype, manufacturer. We've got a prototype. We think we're going to have them in 4 weeks. Would you like to pre-order? Give you 10% off, right? Collect all that money up front. They know how many units to order now. And when they go live, they've got a whole bunch of people who are ready to leave reviews. So again, you can let your email list tell you what they want if you ask, and then create what they say they want, and then sell it to them. So that is a very, very applicable thing for almost anybody. And it's not something that a lot of people do. But the people who do this, they make their customers very happy, because they're creating exactly what people have already said they wanted. They're usually like minimal cash flow problems, because they can sell things before they take the time and resources to create them. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about that, but it's a cool strategy, and it's like the core of my monetization strategy for everything I do.
Yeah, I think it's powerful, and we're coming up on time here, Greg. So I just want to highlight that, everything you've laid out here today, I think is super solid and on point with how to go about approaching this process. And what you just outlined for us here, like, circles right back to, like, hey, just starting a list that's focused on like an audience that you can serve, that you can create unique content on, that you can build those relationships with consistency. As you grow, you can monetize. There's plenty of avenues on there, but for those that haven't got a list, you got to start somewhere. And so I would encourage everyone, right, to get started with your email newsletter, so that you have some place that you can consistently be driving somebody back to and deliver that consistent value. Kelly, if you have anything on your mind that you'd like to share here, we just got a few minutes left. I'd love to hear Greg after that, just if you have any final tips to leave us folks with. But Kelly, anything that stands out to you from today's call?
Nothing other than I'm off to go email my list. No, I think it's great. Like, I love the way you laid it out, again, like reiterating just the benefit of a newsletter. I feel like it's something that no matter where we're at in our email list, we could add value with that. And I know a lot of us just get caught up in like the the task, right? Like the difficulty of what that looks like to actually come up and create a newsletter. But I appreciate you because you laid it out just very simply. And the whole time I was like, oh, I could totally do that. So thank you for that.
Welcome.
Yeah, and anything that you'd want to leave someone with that is considering a newsletter and wants to get started, any words of inspiration, maybe, Greg, that you think would be helpful?
Yeah, I would say just get started. Again, this is the core asset to any online business, in my opinion. This is the thing that drives revenue, drives value. Um, it's so powerful. It's better to start sooner rather than later. And if you're still just kind of unsure about the direction you want to take, go sign up for 10 newsletters in the niche or market that you're interested in and get a feel for what other people are doing, get a feel for what they do well and maybe what's missing. And that can maybe instruct you in how you can create something that really does have a unique spin in that space.
Excellent. And for those that want to follow more about you, check out Email Magic or just connect with you, Greg, online. Where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, my newsletter is emailmagic.com, so they can sign up there. People can reach me, greg@emailmagic.com. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. So I'm pretty easy to find. And if anybody wants to reach out, be happy to chat.
Sounds good. We'll have those links below this video. Thanks again, Greg, and everyone here for tuning in live. Go out and get your newsletters growing, guys. This is the #1 asset if you're in an online business, for at least having a foundation to build from, have that communication with your audience, and own that communication so that you can continue to grow your business and build those relationships. All right, guys, we'll see you in the next video. Cheers, y'all.